I have spent many years observing the human mind, and one truth has revealed itself repeatedly. Most people believe they are conscious beings directing their lives with rational thought. Yet in reality, their actions are guided by forces hidden beneath the surface of awareness. These forces reside in what we call the subconscious, or more precisely, the unconscious mind. It is vast, mysterious, and extraordinarily powerful. If one wishes to understand human behavior, one must look beyond conscious intention and examine the deeper layers of the psyche. The conscious mind is only a small island in the middle of a vast ocean. We like to imagine that we make decisions logically and freely, yet the majority of our thoughts, desires, fears, and reactions originate from the unconscious. It shapes how we perceive the world, how we respond to situations, and even the kinds of people we attract into our lives. In my work as a psychologist, I observe that individuals often repeat patterns in relationships, careers, and personal struggles without understanding why. A person may consciously desire happiness, success, or love, yet find themselves trapped in cycles of conflict or disappointment. When asked why they make certain choices, they often cannot explain their behavior. This is because the true motivations behind their actions lie hidden in the unconscious. The unconscious mind contains memories, instincts, emotions, and experiences that the conscious mind either cannot or will not acknowledge. Some of these contents are harmless or neutral, but many are suppressed because they are uncomfortable, painful, or socially unacceptable. When a person refuses to acknowledge certain aspects of themselves, those aspects do not disappear. Instead, they retreat into the unconscious and continue to influence behavior from the shadows. Imagine a man who believes himself to be calm and rational. He prides himself on his composure and denies that he ever experiences anger. Yet in stressful situations he becomes unexpectedly aggressive or hostile. He may insist that others provoke him or that circumstances force him to react in such a way. However, what truly occurs is that his suppressed anger resides in the unconscious, waiting for moments when it can emerge. The unconscious mind does not operate according to the same rules as the conscious mind. It communicates through symbols, emotions, dreams, and impulses rather than logical language. This is why dreams are so important. During sleep, the unconscious reveals fragments of its contents through symbolic imagery. Dreams provide glimpses into desires, fears, and unresolved conflicts that the conscious mind has ignored. When people fail to understand their unconscious, they are often controlled by it. They may believe they are making free choices, yet those choices are influenced by unresolved psychological forces. A person may choose a partner who mirrors unresolved issues from childhood. Another may sabotage their own success because deep within they fear responsibility or failure. One of the most important discoveries in psychology is that the unconscious mind seeks balance and integration. It attempts to bring hidden elements into consciousness so that the individual can achieve psychological wholeness. However, many people resist this process. They prefer to maintain a comfortable image of themselves rather than confront the complexity of their inner world. This resistance leads to inner conflict. When certain aspects of the personality are denied or repressed, they form what I call the shadow. The shadow contains qualities that the conscious ego refuses to accept. These may include anger, jealousy, ambition, fear, vulnerability, or even creativity and power that the individual has never allowed themselves to express. The more strongly a person denies their shadow, the more influence it gains over their life. It manifests through projection, impulsive behavior, irrational fears, and recurring emotional patterns. People often see in others the qualities they cannot recognize in themselves. For example, someone who represses their own aggression may constantly perceive hostility in others. To become aware of the unconscious is not an easy task. It requires courage, patience, and honest self-reflection. Yet it is the first step toward true freedom. When a person begins to observe their reactions, dreams, fantasies, and emotional responses, they slowly uncover the hidden forces shaping their behavior. Awareness transforms unconscious influence into conscious understanding. Instead of being controlled by hidden patterns, an individual gains the ability to recognize them and choose a different path. This process is the beginning of what I call individuation, the journey toward becoming a whole and integrated human being. Most people never undertake this journey. They live their lives guided by unconscious forces they do not understand. They blame circumstances, other people, or fate for their difficulties, unaware that many of their struggles originate within their own psyche. But those who choose to explore the depths of their mind discover something remarkable. The unconscious is not merely a repository of problems and suppressed emotions. It is also the source of creativity, intuition, wisdom, and psychological transformation. When its contents are brought into conscious awareness, they enrich life rather than control it. Understanding the unconscious allows a person to break free from repetitive patterns. It reveals the true motivations behind behavior and provides the opportunity to change them. Instead of reacting automatically, one can act with awareness and intention. In this way, the subconscious or unconscious mind does not have to control your life. Rather, it can become a powerful ally in the process of self-discovery and personal growth. But this transformation begins with a simple realization. The conscious mind is only a small part of who we are, and beneath it lies a vast and powerful inner world waiting to be understood. If one truly wishes to understand how the subconscious controls life, one must first confront a concept that many people instinctively avoid. I call this concept a shadow. The shadow is one of the most powerful components of the unconscious mind, and yet it remains largely hidden from awareness. Every human being develops an identity, what we call the ego. The ego is the image we present to the world and the story we tell ourselves about who we are. From childhood, we learn which qualities are acceptable and which are not. Society rewards certain behaviors while condemning others. Parents praise kindness, obedience, and discipline, but often reject anger, selfishness, or defiance. As a result, we begin to shape ourselves according to these expectations. We keep the traits that earn approval and gradually push the unwanted aspects of our personality out of consciousness. Yet these rejected qualities do not disappear. They sink into the unconscious, forming what I call the shadow. The shadow contains everything we refuse to recognize about ourselves. It may include aggression, envy, selfishness, pride, fear, and many other impulses that conflict with the image we wish to maintain. But it is important to understand that the shadow does not consist only of negative qualities. Sometimes it also contains strengths that have never been allowed to develop: creativity, confidence, independence, or passion. When a person refuses to acknowledge the shadow, it begins to operate independently of conscious control. The unconscious seeks expression, and therefore the shadow finds ways to reveal itself through behavior, emotions, and projections onto others. One of the most common ways the shadow appears is through projection. Projection occurs when a person attributes their own unconscious qualities to someone else. For instance, a man who suppresses his own jealousy may constantly accuse others of being jealous. A woman who denies her own ambition may criticize others for being overly ambitious. In such cases, the individual believes they are describing someone else, but in reality, they are revealing aspects of themselves that remain unconscious. This phenomenon explains why certain people provoke unusually strong emotional reactions in us. Sometimes we feel intense dislike or irritation toward a person we barely know. We may believe the cause lies entirely within them. Yet often the true reason is that they reflect qualities we cannot accept in ourselves. The shadow, therefore, acts like a mirror. It shows us aspects of our personality that the conscious mind refuses to see. Unfortunately, most people react to this mirror with denial rather than curiosity. They defend their ego and insist that the problem lies entirely outside themselves. In doing so, they allow the shadow to remain hidden and continue influencing their behavior without awareness. But the shadow does not remain silent forever. The more it is ignored, the stronger its influence becomes. It may emerge through sudden anger, irrational fears, destructive habits, or repeated conflicts in relationships. Consider a person who prides themselves on being calm and patient. They suppress all feelings of anger because they believe anger is unacceptable. Yet one day, under pressure, they explode in rage over a trivial matter. To others, the reaction seems disproportionate, but in truth, the anger has been accumulating in the unconscious for years. What appears to be a sudden outburst is actually the shadow, forcing its way into consciousness. Another example can be seen in individuals who constantly criticize others. Their judgments may appear moral or rational, yet often they reflect qualities the critic cannot tolerate within themselves. The shadow finds expression through condemnation of others. This is why understanding the shadow is essential for psychological development. Without awareness of the shadow, a person remains divided against themselves. The ego maintains an illusion of purity or superiority, while the unconscious carries the rejected aspects of personality. Such division creates inattention. The individual may feel restless, dissatisfied, or emotionally unstable without understanding why. The unconscious seeks integration, but the ego resists. The task of psychological growth is not to destroy the shadow but to recognize and integrate it. Integration means acknowledging that these qualities exist within us, even if we do not wish them to define our actions. To recognize one's shadow requires courage. It means admitting that we are not purely virtuous or entirely rational. It means confronting emotions and impulses that challenge our self-image. Yet this confrontation is not destructive, it is liberating. When a person becomes aware of their shadow, they gain the ability to manage it consciously. Anger can be transformed into assertiveness. Ambition can be directed toward meaningful goals. Fear can become a source of caution rather than paralysis. The shadow, when integrated, becomes a source of energy and vitality. Many of the most creative and powerful individuals in history possessed a strong awareness of their inner contradictions. Instead of denying their darker impulses, they learned to channel that energy into productive expression. However, when the shadow remains unconscious, it often dominates behavior in destructive ways. Entire societies can be influenced by collective shadows, projecting fear and hostility onto other groups. History provides many tragic examples of this phenomenon. On an individual level, the shadow controls life whenever we react automatically rather than consciously. Whenever we feel irrational hatred, jealousy, or fear without understanding its origin, the shadow is likely at work. To bring the shadow into awareness, one must begin with honest observation. Notice emotional reactions that seem excessive. Pay attention to recurring conflicts in relationships. Reflect on the qualities you most strongly condemn in others. Often these reactions provide clues to the hidden aspects of your own psyche. Dreams can also reveal the shadow. In dreams, the unconscious speaks through symbolic figures. Dark or threatening characters often represent aspects of the shadow seeking recognition. Instead of rejecting these symbols, one should attempt to understand what they represent within the self. The ultimate goal is not to eliminate the shadow, but to accept its existence. As part of the human condition, only by acknowledging our darkness can we become truly conscious individuals. In this way, the shadow no longer controls life from the unconscious. Instead, it becomes integrated into the personality, providing depth, strength, and authenticity. Those who refuse to confront the shadow remain prisoners of unconscious forces, but those who face it discover that self-knowledge is the foundation of true freedom. When people first begin to explore the unconscious mind, they often assume it consists only of personal memories and forgotten experiences. Indeed, part of the unconscious is personal. It contains events from childhood, suppressed emotions, and aspects of personality that the conscious mind has rejected. However, my research led me to a discovery that reaches far beyond individual experience. Beneath the personal unconscious lies a deeper and far more ancient layer of the psyche. I call this layer the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is not formed by personal experience. It is inherited. Just as the human body carries genetic traits passed down through generations, The mind also carries psychological patterns that have developed throughout human history. These patterns exist within every human being, regardless of culture, nationality, or upbringing. They represent fundamental structures of the psyche that shape how we perceive the world and respond to life. I discovered this idea while studying myths, religions, dreams, and symbols from many different civilizations. I noticed that cultures separated by thousands of miles and many centuries often produce strikingly similar stories and symbolic images. Ancient myths from Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Americas contain recurring characters and themes. The hero who embarks on a dangerous journey, the wise old guide who offers guidance, the nurturing mother, the destructive monster, the transformation through struggle. At first glance, these similarities appear mysterious. How could people who never communicated share such similar symbolic structures? The answer lies within the collective unconscious. These recurring patterns are what I call archetypes. Archetypes are universal psychological forms that shape human experience. They are not specific images themselves, but rather underlying structures that influence how images and symbols appear in dreams, myths, and imagination. In other words, archetypes are like invisible blueprints within the psyche. One of the most recognizable archetypes is the hero. The hero represents the individual who must confront danger, overcome obstacles, and ultimately transform through struggle. This story appears in countless myths, legends, and modern films because it reflects a fundamental psychological process, the human journey toward growth and self-realization. Another powerful archetype is the shadow, which we discussed earlier. The shadow represents the dark aspects of the psyche that must be confronted before transformation can occur. There is also the wise old man or wise woman, an archetype representing knowledge and guidance. In myths, this figure often appears as a mentor who helps the hero understand the path ahead. Psychologically, this archetype represents inner wisdom emerging from the unconscious. The mother archetype is another universal pattern. It symbolizes protection, nourishment, and creation. At the same time, it can also appear in destructive forms, representing the overwhelming power of nature or emotional dependency. These archetypes do not control us directly like commands. Rather, they influence the ways we interpret experiences and the roles we adopt in life. For example, many people unconsciously identify with the hero archetype. They feel compelled to prove themselves through achievement, challenge, or sacrifice. Others may embody the caretaker or the explorer. Archetypes also shape relationships. People often project archetypal images onto others without realizing it. A man may unconsciously project the image of the nurturing mother onto his partner, expecting emotional comfort and support that no individual can fully provide. A woman may project the image of the heroic protector onto someone she loves. Such projections can create powerful emotional connections, but they can also lead to disappointment when reality fails to match the unconscious image. The collective unconscious also reveals itself in dreams. Dreams frequently contain symbols that the dreamer has never consciously encountered, yet they resemble ancient mythological imagery. For instance, a person may dream of descending into a dark cave, confronting a monster, or discovering hidden treasure. These symbols appear repeatedly in myths because they represent universal psychological processes. The cave often symbolizes the unconscious mind itself. The monster may represent the shadow that must be confronted. The treasure represents psychological insight or transformation. In this sense, dreams are not random events. They are expressions of deeper psychological forces seeking to guide the individual toward balance and integration. Understanding the collective unconscious allows us to see human behavior from a broader perspective. Many personal struggles are not purely individual problems, but reflections of universal psychological patterns. When someone feels lost in life, they may be experiencing what mythologists describe as the hero's call to adventure. When a person faces inner darkness or fear, they may be confronting the shadow, the archetypal nature of these experiences. explains why certain stories resonate so deeply with people across cultures. Films, novels, and myths that follow archetypal patterns evoke powerful emotional responses because they reflect structures already present in the human psyche. However, archetypes can also influence life in ways we do not consciously understand. When individuals become possessed by archetypal forces, they may behave in extreme or irrational ways. For example, a person who identifies too strongly with the hero archetype may feel compelled to prove themselves constantly, risking exhaustion or self-destructs. Someone dominated by the shadow archetype may become consumed by anger or resentment. The key to psychological health is not to suppress archetypes, but to become aware of them. Awareness allows the conscious mind to balance these powerful forces, rather than being overwhelmed by them. When we recognize archetypal patterns within our own lives, we gain insight into the deeper meaning of our experiences. Challenges become part of a larger journey, rather than isolated struggles. This realization transforms how we understand ourselves and others. Instead of viewing life as a series of random events, we begin to see patterns that reflect the deeper structures of the human mind. In this way, the collective unconscious quietly shapes human life from beneath the surface. It influences our dreams, our stories, our relationships, and even the roles we adopt in society. Yet most people remain unaware of its existence. They live their lives guided by ancient psychological patterns, without realizing that these patterns have existed long before they were born. To explore the collective unconscious is to step into a vast landscape of symbols, myths, and universal human experiences. It reveals that the human mind is not isolated but connected to a deeper psychological heritage, shared by all humanity. And when we begin to recognize these patterns within ourselves, we take another step toward understanding how the subconscious mind shapes the path of our lives. If there is one doorway through which the subconscious mind most clearly reveals itself, it is through dreams. For centuries, people have been fascinated by dreams, often believing them to be mystical messages or supernatural visions. While such interpretations may contain symbolic truth, the real significance of dreams lies within the psychology of the unconscious mind. Dreams are the natural language of the subconscious. During the day, the conscious mind dominates our awareness. It organizes thoughts, makes decisions, and interacts with the external world. However, the conscious mind also filters experience. It ignores many emotional reactions, suppresses uncomfortable ideas, and rejects aspects of personality that do not fit the image we wish to maintain. At night, when consciousness relaxes its control, the unconscious begins to speak. Dreams allow the hidden layers of the psyche to express themselves through images and symbols. These symbols often appear strange or confusing because the unconscious does not communicate through logical language. Instead, it speaks through metaphor, imagery, and emotional associations. Many people dismiss their dreams as meaningless or random, yet my observations have shown that dreams frequently reveal psychological truths that the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. For example, a person who believes they are confident and successful may repeatedly dream of falling, being chased, or becoming lost. Such dreams may indicate underlying anxiety or insecurity that remains hidden during waking life. Another individual may dream of discovering hidden rooms inside a familiar house. In psychological symbolism, the house often represents the mind itself. Hidden rooms may symbolize unexplored aspects of personality waiting to be discovered. Dreams therefore serve an important psychological function. They attempt to restore balance within the psyche. When the conscious mind becomes too one-sided, the unconscious compensates by presenting opposing perspectives in dreams. If someone is excessively rational, dreams may appear emotional or chaotic. If someone suppresses fear or vulnerability, dreams may present threatening situations that force those emotions into awareness. This process is not meant to punish the dreamer, but to guide them towards psychological wholeness. One of the most common dream symbols is the journey. The dreamer may travel through forests, climb mountains, cross oceans, or wander through unfamiliar cities. These journeys often reflect the inner path of psychological development. The unconscious frequently uses landscapes to represent states of mind. Dark forests may symbolize confusion or fear. Mountains may represent challenges or goals. Rivers may symbolize emotional transitions or the passage of time. Another powerful dream symbol is the appearance of unknown characters. These figures are rarely random. They often represent different aspects of the dreamer's personality. A threatening stranger may represent the shadow, the part of the personality that the conscious mind refuses to accept. A wise guide may represent the archetype of inner wisdom emerging from the unconscious. Sometimes dreams present conflicts between different characters. These conflicts often reflect psychological tensions within the dreamer's own mind. For instance, a dream in which two people argue may represent a struggle between logic and emotion, ambition and fear, independence and security. It is important to understand that dream symbols are rarely universal in a simple sense. While archetypal patterns exist, each symbol must also be interpreted within the personal context of the dreamer. A snake, for example, may represent danger to one person, but transformation or healing to another, depending on their experiences and emotional associations. Therefore, interpreting dreams requires reflection rather than rigid rules. The dreamer must ask what the symbol means to them personally and what emotions it evokes. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that dreams predict the future in a literal sense. Dreams do not function as fortune-telling devices. Instead, they reveal psychological processes that influence the future through behavior and perception. If a dream reveals suppressed fear, that fear may affect decisions in waking life. If it reveals hidden ambition or creativity, recognizing it may lead to new opportunities. In this way, dreams influence the future indirectly by shaping awareness. I have often observed that individuals who ignore their dreams remain unaware of important psychological conflicts. These unresolved tensions eventually appear in other forms: anxiety, depression, relationship difficulties, or destructive habits. On the other hand, people who learn to observe their dreams gain valuable insight into their inner world. Keeping a dream journal is one of the simplest ways to begin this process. By recording dreams upon waking, patterns begin to emerge. Recurring symbols, emotions, or situations reveal themes that may reflect deeper psychological issues. Over time, the relationship between the conscious and unconscious mind becomes more cooperative. Instead of ignoring the messages of the unconscious, the individual begins to understand them. This dialogue between consciousness and the unconscious is essential for psychological growth. Dreams also play a role in creativity and problem solving. Many artists, scientists, and thinkers throughout history have reported receiving inspiration through dreams. The unconscious mind processes information differently from the conscious mind, allowing new connections to form. Sometimes a dream presents an unexpected solution to a problem that seemed impossible during waking thought. In this sense, the subconscious mind is not merely a source of hidden fears or unresolved emotions. It is also a source of imagination, intuition, and creativity. When the conscious mind learns to listen to dreams rather than dismiss them, the unconscious becomes a powerful ally rather than a mysterious force. Dreams remind us that the mind is far more complex than we often assume. Beneath the surface of daily thoughts lies an entire world of images, symbols, and emotional energies working quietly within us. And when we begin to understand this symbolic language, we gain insight into how the subconscious influences our choices, our relationships, and ultimately the direction of our lives. Many people believe that relationships are guided purely by conscious choice. We imagine that we select our friends, partners, and companions through logic, preference, and circumstance. Yet when we examine human relationships more carefully, a deeper pattern becomes visible. People often find themselves repeatedly drawn to similar types of individuals. Someone may enter one relationship after another with partners who share the same personality traits, behaviors, or emotional patterns. Even when the person consciously desires something different, the same dynamic appears again. This repetition is not accidental. The subconscious mind plays a powerful role in determining the people we are drawn to. Hidden psychological patterns shape attraction in ways that are rarely recognized by the conscious mind. From childhood onward, we form emotional impressions of the world and the people around us. Our early experiences with parents, caregivers, and authority figures leave deep imprints on the unconscious mind. These experiences influence what feels familiar, safe, exciting, or threatening. Later in life, we often seek relationships that unconsciously resemble these early experiences. A person who grew up with emotionally distant parents may find themselves repeatedly attracted to partners who are similarly distant or unavailable. Another person who experienced chaos in childhood may feel strangely drawn to intense or dramatic relationships. To the conscious mind, these attractions may seem mysterious or irrational, but the subconscious mind is attempting to recreate familiar emotional environments, even when those environments are unhealthy. The unconscious seeks what it recognizes. This does not mean that people deliberately choose painful relationships. Rather, the unconscious mind associates familiarity with safety. Even negative patterns can feel comfortable simply because they are known. In addition to childhood experiences, the unconscious also influences attraction through projection. Earlier we discussed how individuals project their shadow onto others. A similar process occurs in romantic relationships. Within every person exist both masculine and feminine psychological qualities. I referred to these inner figures as the anima and the animus. The anima represents the feminine aspect within the male psyche, while the animus represents the masculine aspect within the female psyche. These inner figures influence how individuals perceive and relate to members of the opposite sex. When a man encounters a woman who reflects aspects of his inner anima, he may feel a powerful emotional attraction. Likewise, when a woman meets a man who resembles her inner animus, she may experience a similar fascination. However, what the person is responding to is not necessarily the individual themselves, but the unconscious projection of their inner psychological image. At the beginning of relationships, these projections can create intense feelings of connection and admiration. People may believe they have discovered the perfect partner, yet over time, as reality gradually replaces projection, disappointment may occur. The partner cannot fully embody the unconscious image that has been projected onto them. When the illusion fades, conflict often arises. This process explains why many relationships begin with idealization and end with frustration. The subconscious mind creates powerful expectations that reality cannot sustain. But attraction is not determined solely by projections. The subconscious also seeks psychological balance. Often we are drawn to individuals who possess qualities that we ourselves lack or suppress. A quiet and reserved person may be attracted to someone bold and expressive. A highly logical individual may feel drawn to someone emotional and spontaneous. In these cases, the unconscious recognizes complementary qualities that could help bring balance to the personality. Such relationships have the potential to encourage personal growth. By interacting with someone who expresses qualities we lack, we become aware of new aspects of ourselves. However, growth only occurs when individuals remain conscious of these dynamics. When people become unconscious of their projections and expectations, relationships can become sources of conflict rather than development. For example, someone who suppresses their own independence may initially admire a partner who appears confident and free, but over time they may begin to resent that same independence, because it reminds them of their own unexpressed desires. The subconscious therefore shapes relationships in complex ways. It influences attraction, projection, emotional expectations, and even the conflicts that arise between individuals. Many people search endlessly for the perfect partner, without realizing that the true challenge lies within their own psyche. Until unconscious patterns are recognized, the same relationship dynamics often repeat themselves. Awareness is the key to transformation. When individuals begin to examine their emotional reactions and patterns of attraction, They gain insight into the forces guiding their relationships. They may discover that their strongest attractions are connected to unresolved psychological issues. Instead of blaming others for relationship difficulties, they begin to recognize their own projections and expectations. This recognition does not eliminate attraction or emotion. Rather, it brings greater clarity and authenticity into relationships. When two individuals relate to each other as they truly are, rather than through unconscious projections, genuine connection becomes possible. In such relationships, each person takes responsibility for their own psychological development rather than expecting the other to fulfill unconscious needs. The subconscious will always influence human relationships. Its patterns are deeply rooted in the structure of the psyche, but when these patterns are brought into awareness, they lose their power to control behavior blindly. Relationships then become opportunities for growth rather than repetition. Through understanding the subconscious influences behind attraction, we move one step closer to understanding ourselves and, ultimately, to creating healthier and more conscious connections with others. Throughout this exploration of the subconscious mind, we have uncovered many of the hidden forces that shape human life. We have examined the shadow, the archetypes of the collective unconscious, the symbolic language of dreams, and the mysterious ways in which the subconscious influences our relationships. But all of these ideas ultimately lead to a single, central concept in psychological development: individuation. Individuation is the process through which a person becomes their true self. Most people believe they already know who they are. They identify with their profession, their social roles, their beliefs, and the image they present to the world. Yet these identities represent only the conscious ego, the small and limited part of the psyche that interacts with daily life. The deeper self, however, is far more complex. Within every individual exists a vast inner world composed of conscious thoughts, unconscious desires, archetypal patterns, and unexplored potentials. The purpose of individuation is to bring these elements into a harmonious relationship. In other words, individuation is the journey towards psychological wholeness. This process often begins when a person becomes aware that something in their life is incomplete. They may experience dissatisfaction, inner conflict, or a sense that they are living according to expectations rather than authentic desires. Such feelings are not signs of failure. They are signals from the unconscious that deeper development is necessary. At first, this realization can be unsettling. The ego prefers stability and certainty. It resists the idea that there are unknown aspects of the personality waiting to emerge. Yet psychological growth requires confronting these unknown parts of ourselves. The first step in individuation is recognizing the shadow. As we discussed earlier, the shadow contains qualities that the conscious mind has rejected. By acknowledging these hidden aspects of personality, we begin to understand ourselves more honestly. The second step involves recognizing the archetypal forces within the psyche: the hero, the shadow, the guide, the creator, the destroyer. These archetypal energies influence human behavior in profound ways. When individuals become aware of these patterns, they gain insight into the deeper meaning of their experiences. Dreams also play a crucial role in individuation. They act as messages from the unconscious, offering guidance and revealing psychological imbalances that require attention. Through careful reflection on dreams and emotional reactions, the individual gradually builds a dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious mind. But individuation is not a quick or simple transformation. It is a lifelong process. Many people avoid this journey because it requires confronting uncertainty, contradiction, and vulnerability. The ego prefers to maintain a simple identity, rather than acknowledge the complexity of the human psyche. However, those who undertake the path of individuation often discover a profound sense of inner freedom. When unconscious forces are recognized, they lose their power to control behavior blindly. Instead of reacting automatically to fears, desires, or projections, individuals gain the ability to respond consciously. They become more aware of their motivations, their emotional patterns, and the deeper meanings behind their experiences. Another important aspect of individuation is accepting the paradoxes within human nature. People often believe they must choose between opposing qualities: strength or vulnerability, reason or emotion, independence or connection. But the mature personality learns to integrate these opposites rather than reject them. True psychological development occurs when a person recognizes that these opposing forces can coexist within a balanced personality. The goal of individuation is not perfection. It is authenticity. An individuated person does not attempt to appear flawless or superior. Instead, they acknowledge both their strengths and their limitations. They understand that the human psyche contains both light and darkness. This acceptance creates a deeper sense of inner stability. Individuals who have progressed along the path of individuation tend to experience life differently. They are less controlled by social expectations and more guided by inner values. They approach challenges not merely as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth. Relationships also change during this process. Rather than projecting unconscious expectations onto others, individuated individuals relate to people more realistically and compassionately. They recognize that every person is also navigating their own unconscious patterns and psychological struggles. Perhaps most importantly, individuation leads to a stronger connection with what I call the self. The self represents the totality of the psyche, the integration of conscious and unconscious elements into a unified whole. It is not the ego, but a deeper center of psychological balance. When individuals move closer to the self, they often experience a greater sense of purpose and meaning in life. They begin to see their personal struggles as part of a broader journey of self-discovery. Difficulties become opportunities for transformation rather than mere sources of suffering. The subconscious mind no longer acts as a hidden force controlling life from the shadows. Instead, it becomes a partner in the process of growth. Through awareness, reflection, and integration, the individual gradually transforms unconscious influences into conscious understanding, and in doing so, they move closer to becoming the person they were always meant to be. Individuation is not the destination of a single moment of enlightenment. It is the ongoing process of discovering the richness and complexity of the human soul. Those who embark on this journey often realize that the greatest mystery in life is not the world outside us, but the vast and powerful universe that exists within the human mind.